Hey guys, Matt here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to take you on a journey back in time, 16 years to be exact, and walk you through how I became a UX UI designer. From starting out as a fresh designer back in 2008 in Toronto, Canada, all the way through to becoming the head of experience design at Frank Digital in Sydney, Australia in 2022. I'm going to walk you through what I've learned along the way, as well as what I'd do differently if I was starting all over again. All right guys, let's go. So let's rewind the clock back to 2008. I was living in Toronto with my family and the internet was a different place back then. So social media was just getting started. You had Facebook, you had Twitter, they were very new. Instagram didn't exist. I know, crazy, right? MySpace was actually the king at the time. And when it came to web design, everything was mostly static and quite new. The tools we had to create with, especially back then, were pretty basic by today's standards. Shout out to Photoshop CS4, if you know, you know. I went to college at Seneca Polytechnic and I studied digital media arts, and that's where I got to dip my toes into everything from web design, graphic design, typography, photography, animation, and film and video even. But I found myself gravitating to web design. I was really interested in it and even was doing a bit of freelancing on the side during my college years as well. After graduation, I was able to land my first full-time job as a web designer. And I worked for a small company. There was 3 of us. It was run out of my boss's house in his basement. And my job there was to basically design websites. And there were CMS-based websites at the time. I believe it was Joomla as the CMS. Nice. I know. And yeah, my job was basically to chop up these templates and customize them, make them look better than, a stock template. So there was that kind of web design element to it. But I was also coding front end. I was doing CSS and HTML here and there. The other cool thing about this business that I was working in had a content creation arm at the time. It wasn't called content creation, but they were doing photography and videography for magazines and other publications. And so I was able to be exposed to that. And being a company of 3 and wearing a lot of hats as a startup, I got roped into becoming the photography assistant. So I was attending shoots and holding up lights and bouncers and having the B camera running to capture footage and B-roll and all kinds of stuff. And so it kind of exposed me to that world of content creation, even though we didn't call it content creation back then. That's essentially what it was. In early 2010, I was a bit of a crossroads. So my family, they'd already moved back to Sydney from Toronto. I think about the year before that. I was thinking about my long-term future and I was wondering, do I stay in Toronto and do I invest and keep going in my career there? Or do I, bite the bullet, move back to Sydney and think long-term about where I want to be in my career, what country, all of that stuff. And, being a 22-year-old or whatever I was at the time, you don't know anything at that age. You're just kind of making decisions and going with it. So long story short, I made the decision to move back to Sydney. And to be honest, it was the best decision I ever made. Shortly after that, I met my what is now wife, and my life has been really blessed as a result. But I think from a career perspective, it turned out to be one of the best decisions for me to move back to Sydney. Essentially from 2010 to 2013, I worked in Sydney at a few agencies, a few different design agencies. And essentially at this point, I was a mid-weight digital designer. So this was around the time when web design started to split into different specializations. So you had web design and development as their own recognized skills and trades. You were either a designer or a developer, and I found myself firmly planted in the design camp. I remember I still did some front-end development work on some of the designs that I was creating, basic HTML and CSS, but what I remember quite clearly was struggling with JavaScript and having to implement some of these more advanced animation libraries and being like, dude, this is hard. I really don't want to be sitting here writing code. I want to be creating designs. And that's where I kind of had a bit of a moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to park the development stuff and go all in as a designer. So in 2013, I joined Frank Digital as a senior digital designer. This was a huge shift for me because for the first time in my career, I could 100% focus on being a designer. And I absolutely loved it. There was a dedicated team of talented front and back end developers that I got to collaborate with. But my role was purely to focus on the design. Essentially, I was still doing everything in Photoshop CC, represent. By 2014, after a few successful projects with Frank Digital in that first year, I got promoted to design director, which was a huge boost to my confidence as a designer. It was around this time that I started to take a real interest in user experience and not just making things look pretty for the sake of it and having a nice aesthetic, but actually thinking about the user of these products, what they were motivated by, what they would feel, and how people would interact with the products that we were creating for them. About 2015, this is where the industry that we work in started to really ramp up and our UX and UI tools started to evolve. As we had things like Sketch, UX Pin, Figma, there's a few others that I've probably forgotten to name, but essentially geared for us UX UI designers. Absolutely changed the game. These tools made it easier to create, to prototype, to iterate, and to share work with clients. No longer were we working in Photoshop having to save out images and send images and create PDFs and that whole schmozzle that we used to have to do. This was really geared for digital products and websites, and we were absolutely loving it. So we adopted those at Frank as these tools came about. So during this time, concepts like atomic design and creating and implementing design systems were gaining a lot of traction in the industry. And it's something that has stuck with me ever since. And we started implementing at Frank. Just going back to atomic design, if you don't know what atomic design is, it's a methodology for creating component-driven websites and applications. There's a really good book by Brad Frost that I recommend you read. Video's not sponsored, but yeah, check it out. It's worth it. And yeah, that concept has stuck with me and our team ever since. At Frank, we started implementing these design systems and ways of working. Essentially, it influenced how we created component-driven websites moving forward and how we even sold them into clients in new business arrangements. So yeah, really exciting time in the industry, from the tools we were using through to the concepts and the way that we started to work. Fast forward to today, and I'm the head of experience design at Frank Digital in Sydney, Australia. I've had this position since 2022, and I'm absolutely loving it. It's been the highlight and the pinnacle of my career without a doubt. I've been with the agency now for over 11 years. And in that, as I mentioned, I've had several roles, from senior digital designer, design director, technical design director, and now the head of experience design, getting to look after the entire UX UI team. I get to contribute to bringing in new business to the company as well, which is really rewarding and has helped me grow in that side of things. I get to mentor and help grow the designers. That to me has been one of the most rewarding parts of this job as well, is the people side and seeing development and growth in your team, developing new leaders, ultimately getting to work with some pretty cool clients along the way and help their businesses grow. So what have I learned in the last 16 years of being a UX UI designer? Well, first I'd say that finding your people is key. Whether it's the people that you work at an agency, your day job, wherever you find yourself, but make sure that you find your tribe, your right people that have your best interest at heart. The culture of the place I find is absolutely vital to doing your best work as a designer. I'm sure we've all had experiences in the past with other jobs where the culture hasn't been so crash hot. Once you do find those people that you click with, that work well with you, and that you're all on the same page, embrace that and don't take it for granted. That was my experience at Frank, was actually finding my people. And then from there, I was able to do my best work and grow in my career. If you're a freelancer and you work a lot on your own, I think developing a community of people that you can contact and reach out to on the regular is awesome. So whatever that looks like for you, networking, being on Slack or Discord channels, just whatever works, but having a network and a community of people, I'd say, is important. Second, I'd say is, for me personally, my foundation, as I mentioned about having a basic understanding of front-end code, has without a doubt made me a better UX UI designer. Being able to understand how websites fundamentally work under the hood has been invaluable to me, and I think it's helped me have more meaningful conversations with developers, and when we're battling it out, being like, I want to design this, and the developers are pushing back, and the healthy tension that exists between designers and developers. For me, it's been helpful because I've been able to actually have that informed conversation. I'm not just sitting there being like, yo man, build my design, and the developer shaking his head being like, this designer has no idea. It's been able to help. I've learned a lot still from these developers along the way, but it's actually helped me kind of start from a position of, I think this is possible. Can we do this? All right. And lastly, and most importantly, I've learned to take ownership of my career trajectory. The industry that we're in, as we know, is always changing. And I think that's what I love the most about it. Once we get comfortable in Figma and we think we're, just coasting along, like they release a new update, they release a new way of working, variables come in, auto layout comes in, all these things that essentially we adopt as designers. And I think that's what's great. We constantly roll with the tech that we're using, we learn along the way, and we get better and build better products as a result. But for me personally, I didn't wait for a boss to tell me that I had to work a certain way or we had to implement this or that. I learned and I adapted and I implemented as I needed to. And I think that's helped get me to where I am today. The second point I'd say to that is also to make yourself indispensable. So strive to be someone who constantly adds value to others, whether that's your business through creating systems or efficiencies, whether that's your colleagues, helping them out, being that kind of person that people can rely on, and also your clients. Make sure that you're delivering value to your paying clients and that they see that value, because trust me, when they see that value, they come back. If you have that mindset, you're going to do well in your career. All right, so what would I do differently if I was starting my career again from zero? First thing is I'd go all in on Figma, learning that software inside and out, growing with it as new features became available. Like I said at the beginning, we at Frank used a lot of different tools early on. We were big Sketch users for quite a number of years, UX Pin as well for wireframing and prototyping, and then eventually got onto the Figma bandwagon. But I think in hindsight, if I was starting from zero, I'd 100% jump in on Figma from day one and learn everything I could about it. All right, and another significant thing that I do differently would be to document the journey and start building a personal brand from day one. And that's something that I didn't do, and it's something that I very much regret now. It's definitely like when it comes to our industry, having a voice online and sharing your design work, sharing your progress, having a portfolio that grows with you. It's absolutely important. And I don't personally have a portfolio. It sounds a bit hypocritical saying that, but I have the agency side, Frank Digital, and I've been at the company for 11 years now, and that is my body of work that I'm proud of. Coming back to the personal brand side of things, that's actually one of the reasons why I've started this YouTube channel, is to hopefully give back to up and coming UX UI designers in the industry and share what I've learned, but also to build my brand, to start working on that. And I feel like, better late than never, but definitely something that I'm focusing on. And even when I think back to where I started in Toronto, Canada back in 2008, that first job that I had, and I was exposed to film and photography and essentially content creation. And here I am today filming a YouTube video. So in some ways, I feel like I've come full circle with everything, and I feel like that's kind of nice. So that's my story, from fresh web designer in 2008 through to head of experience design in 2022. I hope my journey gives some insight and some encouragement in what it takes to grow and develop in this ever-evolving industry that we work in. If you're just starting out, I'd say keep learning, stay curious, and don't be afraid to evolve with the times. But what about you? I'd love to hear down in the comments your experience in your career, whether you're just starting out or with, like me, you've been on the path for a while. What have you learned in your career? What have you found helpful, and how have you grown? If you found this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.